Welcome back to this ministry in the wilderness. It's week 4 of Epiphany, and today we continue with Mark from where we left off last week. In it today, Jesus is teaching in the synagogue. Jesus was a devout Jew. Make no mistake about that. And the people of Jesus' day as well, as Jesus himself saw most people with mental issues as being demonically possessed. It was commonplace. Spirits, good and bad, could possess others. And it explained what was inexplicable in Jesus' day. Why would a person act like this unless they were possessed in some fashion or another? So here we have a reading from Mark, chapter 1, verses 21 through 28. Jesus and his disciples went to Capernaum. And when the Sabbath came, he entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teachings, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying out with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed. And they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. Now, during synagogue services, the scribes would usually be the ones who would read the scriptures, and that makes sense because they were the literate ones, the ones who could read and write. This is not as likely today when most everyone, at least in our culture, could get up and read the scriptures for a day. In the Christian communities, though, in the earliest of days, they would ordain people from their groups to read the scriptures during services. And they called them lectors, hence lecterns and a lectionary. Jesus today did not just read, but taught from the readings, live, in person. He gave a homily, explaining, making real the scriptures and probably telling people how they applied in their lives. Not just as a story or as a set of rules to live by. He revealed the Spirit of truth. Now, doing this would make him sound like a learned man, a man of authority. And making these types of connections could have and probably did trigger one whose mental health was fragile. For this is the story of an ill man, one thought possessed, having an epiphany about the nature of Jesus. While others were just wondering at his authority and the levels of his teachings, this man recognized who he was. And it comes down to us today as Jesus being known to the demons of the world. The demons, the spiritual spirits of evil, knew who he was. The people didn't recognize Jesus, but the spiritual beings who caused illness did. And Jesus was a man who had power over demons. Well, we weren't told what Jesus read or what he taught. Just that it was amazing and it was new to those in Capernaum. What Jesus did, however, was restore a man who others looked down upon. A man with an unclean spirit. He restored him to his community. Because Jesus restores, makes whole through his teachings and presence. Now we have become more enamored by who Jesus was rather than what he taught. His actions were the outcome of his teachings and his being in the world. Everyone, even the unclean, the mentally ill, the outcast, is worthy of having the divine come into their lives. If we are to accept Jesus into our lives today, we need to focus on what he gave the world in his life and teachings. We aren't going to be possessed of the Spirit of Jesus, yet we can abide in the love that he poured out because that still exists today. Love is transcendent. It exists throughout existence. It survives the end of life. We still love those who we know who have died. And that love lifts us up. It gives us and is purpose. To accept Jesus into our lives is to have hope. To have the knowledge that nothing else is needed when we start and end our actions with love. This is insane, though. How can love rule our lives? I mean, look around. Where do we see love being the primary reason behind what people do? We do some things out of love, yet we are often propelled by fear. We provide for those we love, yet fear that they will not have enough. Greed and hatred, the children of fear, are action emotions, which seem to be taking over society at every stage. Putting ourselves and our group before others is the norm, and anything else is nonsense. Yet, this is the antithesis of Jesus' teachings. It is the antithesis of his life and his actions. Had Jesus acted as a man of his day, they would have, admitted his actors as people today, they would have thrown the ill man out of the community, out of the synagogue. He spoke to the man's illness. Come out of him. At the same time, he was meeting the man where he was and loving him. Love is free. It does not bind, but releases. It builds hope and strength. And love endures. It teaches and feeds. It is available to all who want it, like manna in the desert. Yet like that manna, it must be utilized and shared, lest it turn into something less palatable. Jealousy, avarice, the idolatry of people and things. Because love, another name for God's grace, is free, woe betide those who would refuse it to others. Love is not ours to dole out to those that we see fit. We are not the judges, juries, and the executioners of God's will. Life and love, who we claim to have authority over, is false. We who say our way or the highway are not walking the path that Jesus took and that he taught. Now, I try not to get too political during my homilies. Epiphany, though, is about waking up, becoming woke to the fact that the message of Christ, the new teachings he taught so well with authority, was about love, was about acceptance of those we think less of, making communities and people whole, not dividing them. Building bridges, not walls. Taking care of those in harm's way and not adding to the misery. When I hear people preaching the opposite, saying that considering others, meeting them where they are and not where we might want them to be, controlling their lives and limiting their access to the freedoms that we enjoy, I do not hear the message of Christ. It is the old message of tribalism writ large. It is destroying Eden before our eyes to benefit those who already have more than enough. Epiphany is about coming to understand the way of Jesus is a way different than what we've been living for the most part. And by living that way, walking that way, allows us to know what truly built creation and will continue to build creation long past our walking on this path. Will allow us to feel the great joy that is life. Living in, abiding in God's love. As crazy as it seems. And this is the gospel. This is the promise, the covenant. When we open ourselves to the big D divine, love will pour out from the heavens, heal us, and welcome us home. Amen. As usual, if you found this homily to be beneficial, make sure to like and subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below. I know some of you aren't of the same denomination as I or ones in whom I've served, but I believe you are, like them, all seekers of the divine in your life. I pray that this endeavor will be meaningful to you and that you will share your journey with others, that you will walk in love and peace. And as the Navajo say, walk in beauty. We may exist in the wilderness, but we are not alone here, rest assured. Leave a comment if you want and come on back to this channel in the wilderness. I remain yours in faith until next time. Blessings to you all.